you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I realized I didn't have an introductory page, but Norma did such a great job that I don't have to say too much. But so my co-PIs and I, Dr. Sage Kim, and also Linda Weatherspoon, who is she's transitioning into being the ED of Roll Call. And Roll Call is an organization on the west side of Chicago that provides reentry services to families who've been impacted by criminal legal systems. They also do quite a bit of work with community supervision entities such as the probation system. And so Roll Call is very much a fixture within the West Side community. And one reason why I can say that is because my co-PIs and I received a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grant about two years ago, maybe 2.5, and it was to explore the effects on health of interactions with policing system. So we spent quite a bit of time talking to community members, doing community forums, developing our research questions, our interview guide, and really thinking through this approach, this participatory action approach, which was predominantly photo voice. And during that time, Dr. Kim and I got a chance to get to know Roll Call, but also the community members there and their needs. So, and you'll learn more about that as I go on. So, as said in the introduction, yes, so criminal justice practices in the forms of hyper-policing have become a collective experience for many communities that are underserved, that are under-resourced, navigating various forms of violence. Unfortunately, hyper-surveillance is integrally connected to health and to health disparities for these communities. And particularly, research shows that arrests, persistent surveillance, even fears of involuntary contact can heighten risk of anxiety, depressive symptoms, and exposure to traumatic events. Moreover, excessive policing also harms social networks and just the capacity of communities to build and rebuild. So with this said, it was really important for us, as we were also talking to community members, to amplify their lived experiences, to elevate their lived experiences, to understand the ways in which they're experiencing their policing encounters. And to do this, we decided to use photo voice. But let me first mention the research question. So how do communities experience policing efforts, and in what ways does it shape their health, and particularly mental health? And this is a question that really comes from my focus also on the ethics of doing research with communities that are navigating historical and current forms of oppression and trauma. So I'm also really interested in how can participatory research methods be utilized to engage community and build advocacy. So yes, so we engage participants through a photo voice research method. And just to give you a sense of that, photo voice is when you utilize photographic images. It could be photos that you actually took, or symbolic images that you feel represent your feelings. And it's when you use these photos to tell stories, to tell lived experiences, and also to honestly disrupt the power imbalances that are often taking place within a research and community dynamic. Because with photo voice, you're really putting the research absolutely more in the hands of your participants to tell their story in the way that they want to tell it, the way that feels true to them, and it also provides more of a sense of agency. So that's the method that we use, and we ended up engaging 20 participants with all having some level of justice impact, whether it's arrest, whether it's being on probation. Everyone had some level of justice impact. And we ended up holding 4 thematic sessions using a photovoice method. The first session was more about participants coming back to us with their photos and really talking about the way they saw their family and their community more broadly. And we encouraged them to talk about the positive ways, the supportive ways in which they viewed and perceived their community and family, as well as the complexities and challenges. The next sessions was when we started to get really into, so what are your perceptions of policing? And these can be based on encounters you've had in the past, as well as ongoing encounters and experiences and exposures you're navigating right now. And then the latter session was us trying to pull this together and really help them to think about or speak about, because mental health is still incredibly stigmatized, right? So to really help us build a space where our community members felt comfortable talking about, well, how do these experiences and these exposures and encounters with policing systems now shape how you feel about yourself, now shape the way you navigate your community and even talk to each other. So those were the 4 thematic sessions that were undergirded by a photovoice research method. Just to tell you a little bit more about photovoice, because I can imagine some of the questions will probably be around that, because it's a really innovative method. It's a really, it's a method that's rooted in anti-oppressive methods, that's rooted in an understanding that there are incredible social phenomena and problems that communities are facing that really take a very different kind of approach to elevating voices. However, at the same time, we absolutely engaged in trainings around it, so that our participants didn't feel as if we were wanting them to go out and take pictures in ways that put them in jeopardy, that harmed their life, that made them uncomfortable. So we took quite a bit of time around around the ethics of engaging in research in compassionate and trauma-informed ways. And with that, we also highlighted the importance of also using symbolic photos. So not always going out and taking photos saying, oh, I see an officer, let me see if I can get this picture, because we really didn't want them to put themselves in any kind of position of harm, but also talking to them about the ways in which a photo, you can find photos online, free photos that can then be used to represent your feelings of fear, of harm, of joy, of being encouraged. So we really advocated for our community members or our participants to use a variety of ways to show their viewpoints through photos. Another part of doing this kind of participatory action research, because I would put photovoice within that realm, is using a community advisory board. So we had about 4 members of the community. Some were parents, some had justice involvement, some were more on the advocacy realm, who we had assembled, and we often checked in with them about maybe every 3 months to talk about our research questions, to talk about our preliminary findings, to also talk about the ways in which we were hoping to disseminate them. So our CAB was an incredibly meaningful and important part of this research project. And I've used CABs in many of my projects, and I think it's not just instrumental, but it's foundation. It's the foundation part of doing research. So, getting to, I never said my research question, sorry. Where did they go? Give me 1 second. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. How do communities experience policing efforts, and in what ways does it shape their health? Oh wow. How can participatory research methods be utilized to engage community and build advocacy? And I'm realizing I already said that. So, findings. So these are some of the major thematic findings. A lot of our participants brought in photos that were representative of social disorganization and decay and disinvestment within the community. It also became linked to police in action. So seeing police in action was also an indicator of disorganization for our participants. We also absolutely heard very powerfully the duality of feeling underprotected yet hyper-surveilled over police. A lot of our participants brought in photos and spoke about that. And also we heard some participants talking about how this led to a disengagement or detachment from seeking health services. So here are a few of our photos that are amplifying these themes that our participants talk about. So, here's the photo on the left, represented or illuminating this theme of social disorganization, and I'd say disinvestment. There's a lot of work to do. There wasn't a store around. You couldn't buy milk and bread for at least a month. So this participant brought in a photo of a mart, a mini mart, to be able to, that was highly used, that hadn't always been there, that actually had not been there for at least a month. So really trying to indicate or illuminate this serious, concentrated level of disinvestment. You know, in disinvestment of fundamental needs, milk and bread. This was also interesting. The gas station was a huge marker in sight and space for fear, as well as it was a space for needs, and not just needs for gas, but oftentimes a gas station can serve as another kind of mart, right? So here's a quote about the dangerousness of gas stations. So the gas stations are like a hangout spot. It's dangerous for the people that want to get gas, asking for money. The ladies are scared. They're watching their purses, harassment. Even the security guards are afraid. So in these photos and in these quotes, they're really speaking to how the participants felt that they navigated spaces that were quite disorganized for them, and for them that ended up meaning there was a dearth of fundamental needs, as well as this constant fear. And you know, as I was thinking about the constant fear and just the harassment, I started thinking, you know, that's a level of surveillance there. That's more of a lateral sense of surveillance. So when we couple that lateral surveillance with hyper-surveillance, we're really talking about these intersecting forms of surveillance that are incredibly important to talk about. Yeah. So, also on this theme of social disorganization, but more thinking about how police in action was also an indicator of social disorganization. So police are unwilling to endanger themselves. Police are witnessing a shooting. there is no intervention. And here's another quote. They don't care about our community, just getting paid to sit there where y'all was at when they snatched my purse. They come too little, too late. They hang out, then go about their business. So there was this really evident, powerful sense of we see them, but they're not doing anything. They're not doing anything in the sense of helping or serving in the way that many of our participants really truly believed and wanted them to serve. And so this then was complicated with this ever-present feeling of being surveilled and monitoring. So this lack of service, but not a lack of being monitored, and not a lack of being watched, and judged, and criminalized. So on this theme of underprotected and hyper-surveilled, here's another quote. So it be car accidents, it be domestic violence, a lot of reasons why you need the police. Situations that can't avoid calling them, and you will just pray they help you. You don't want their attention focused on you, just watching you. You just feel a fear. They ain't got no warrant but asking my name for no type of reason. If you see an officer trying to say, hey, you pick your battle. So it kind of feels like he's saying you have to make a decision there, a life decision, of how am I going to navigate being called upon or asked upon by a system and by an entity that I fear, And so this is hyper-surveilled yet underprotected yet hyper-surveilled, but then it also spills into the ways in which these complicated these nuanced kind of feelings and impressions and perceptions are then impacting how they navigate these systems and how it shapes the way they engage when they have need, health service needs. So in terms of this disengagement theme that we did see some indicators of, in this quote someone is saying, well, I don't even call them. Don't want to be bothered with them at all. Even if I need them, you never know what can happen. So again, this idea or this feeling, this realized, this perceived feeling of anticipatory fear, the ever-present possibility of harm, even at a time when one is in need. I remember a participant gave a really vivid story of how their son had a chronic illness, and so he needed health services. He talked about the ways in which the police came, and it struck him in a really fearful way of why are the police here when this is about my son who has a chronic illness and needs some hospital attention. Why are the police? And just having them there was incredibly fearful and harmful, and also led to him and many others feeling like, I don't even want to call them. I don't want to call them. I don't even want to engage in health services, or I don't even want to seek health services because there's a fear that the police are going to come. Which then starts to get to even more the traumatization and the sense and the feeling of being criminalized, which is really at the root of this, and I even add stigmatization, which is something I think about a lot. So even if you're not doing anything, you get nervous, tense, you feel powerless. It's like you never know. Even kids, it's like, oh, it's the police. It traumatizes you to always react like that. So this quote is absolutely talking about the ever-present traumatization, feelings of trauma, and fear of always worrying because you never know. And also this quote is talking about this consistent and persistent feeling of powerlessness, nervousness and powerlessness, which speaks to trauma. They don't care about our neighborhoods. If this was the north side, it would be different, but here they don't care about us. We're seen as criminals. So again, I do see this absolutely as an indicator of feeling criminalized, feeling unworthy, feeling devalued as a community, and I think that absolutely speaks to stigma. Community level stigma, not just community level stigma, it's stigma that's felt by an individual, but is rooted in the ways in which your community is seen and those who live there are seen and disinvested in. And so this quote is also really important because it speaks to how the participants are not just talking about the way the police are devaluing them and are criminalizing them, but also how they see the extensions of this policing and criminalization within foundation institutions within their neighborhood, schools. So the schools are like the police. They assume you're a criminal because you're from a poor neighborhood. You black and you go to a public school. So here's this intersection of identities that this participant is saying, these intersecting identities of living in this neighborhood that's under-resourced, that's disinvested from, that has a concentration of lack. Intersecting with my identity as a black person and the perceptions, the criminality that's attached to that blackness, as well as the fact that I'm going to this institution, this public school, is labeling me as a criminal to those that work here to serve me and educate me. So here, again, like a lot of the research is saying, absolutely this extension of the carceral space, extending into public institutions that are here to serve and educate. Yeah, this might be the end of the quotes. Let me see. Yes, okay, so this to talk about more of the findings and get into the ways in which we are continuing to try to disseminate. So, absolutely, it was evident from this research and the pictures and the way the community members illuminate the pictures that current policing and surveillance strategies are disproportionately harming social cohesion and stability within already vulnerable communities. Over-policing has a significant impact on community health and well-being. And social disorganization and surveillance, hyper-surveillance in the form of policing, are contributing to disengagement from seeking health and social services. Now, so dissemination. I was thinking of pictures, but I didn't get them in here. But so after conducting the photovoice study, having the 4 sessions, we had community forums, which were kind of like talkouts, where we presented, we shared our findings with the larger community. And we had 2 of these sessions in the summertime with about maybe 25, 30 participants. And they were incredibly meaningful, and also they were powerful. Because I remember for one of them, a lot of the community members were talking about a shooting that had just happened. So it was really obvious and apparent, and we were very much aware that while we were talking about the ways that participants and community members talked about policing, talked about community level violence, it was active and happening in real time, and they were processing that while they were coming in and talking about the findings or hearing the findings and talking about the way it made them feel. So it was a really powerful experience and moment, and we actually had a trauma specialist at both of the community forums, and she ended up talking about the ways in which, not just the ways in which trauma impacts your body, but also talking about kind of advocacy methods, kind of ways of healing, and so, yeah, it was a really important moment and space. It's a really important space. And so we had 2 community forums, and at the same time, we were starting to prepare for our photovoice exhibit. So we had an exhibit late summer, early fall, where, I'm trying to think where it was, the Botanical Gardens. It was kind of far from here. Along the Green Line, the very end of the Green Line. And it was a beautiful space. And so we had a photovoice exhibit. A lot of our participants came out. They brought family members, and folks who had not been attached to this study came and viewed our photos. We talked a little bit about our process and just the meaning behind, or the intention behind conducting this study in partnership with the community. Also, we talked a lot about the importance of community voice, community engagement, and advocacy, because a lot of folks have not participated in research, and a lot of folks who haven't participated in research have really meaningful views of what the researcher is and who they are and what they want and what they're going to do and what they're not going to do for the community, and how they'll use community voice for their gain and goal. So we took a lot of time to talk about what does it mean to do community work, to work in partnership, and just the ways that we value that. And so the photovoice exhibit was really great. And so we actually also developed a website, and really, honestly, really thanks in part to the Institute for Policies and Civic Engagement, because our Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grant was not going to be able to cover that. So we developed a website in partnership with a designer who has worked with UIC quite a bit. He's an excellent web designer that's rooted in social justice. And so we created a website if you want to check it out. We started to develop community, policy briefs, and we're thinking about the ways of getting the findings out through radio, and also, and this was really important, we're also thinking of ways to seek greater funding, because one thing, something really powerful about this research process was that it wasn't just about researchers doing the work, the investigative and inquiry work, but researchers working in equal partnership with community members. And so one of our co-PIs was a community member who heads up a social service organization who's had her own engagement and impact by justice systems, very rooted in the West Side community. And one thing she brought up really powerfully that I'm really glad that she did was that, we got this funding to do this meaningful work, to really hear folks' lived experiences, but what happens next? What happens to the ways in which we could find funding that would help this organization, Roll Call, be able to give even more services to greater populations? So how are we going to use this research to get a bigger grant? And so we've been working on that, and I'm really glad that Linda spoke her truth, because oftentimes when a community member works with research partners, they can feel stifled, or, they too could come in feeling as if, will my voice be heard as much as the researchers, And so I was really, so we worked with the perfect person, because Linda, I would say she definitely challenged us, to varying degrees. I've done a lot of work with community members, so I feel like I came in pretty attuned, but I'm so glad that she was there to challenge us to think even more deeply. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So that's it for my speaking out and presenting, but I want to open the floor for questions.